There are regions beneath the earth where sunlight has never reached, where time moves differently, measured not in hours or years, but in pressure, in erosion, in the slow carving of stone by unseen water. These passages were not built, they were hollowed out over centuries, patient, indifferent, precise. Down there, the walls do not flex. They do not sympathize. They do not respond to fear. Once a human body commits to a narrow shaft of limestone, there is no negotiation. Gravity takes control, breath becomes currency, and the simple act of turning around can become impossible. Caves are often described as silent, but that silence is deceptive. It amplifies doubt, it magnifies panic. It forces a person to confront the limits of bone, muscle, and will. In today's documentary, we examine a true event that unfolded inside one of the tightest vertical entrances imaginable, a slit in the earth barely wider than a man's chest. What began as routine exploration became a 5-hour battle between flesh and stone, a moment where experience was not enough, where strength failed, and where survival depended entirely on others. This is the story of Alan England at Weatherly Well. Viewer discretion is advised. Morning broke over the Tennessee woods with a hard winter edge. The forest stood bare and skeletal, frost lining fallen leaves and exposed rock. The air carried a stillness that only cold mornings create, a brittle quiet. 4 men stood at the edge of a narrow opening hidden among brush and stone. James Lewis, Alan England, Darrell Moore, Jerry Olson. They were not amateurs. Each had years of experience navigating tight passageways, vertical drops, and unstable terrain. They understood the risks. They respected them. Weeks earlier, Jerry Olson had discovered the cave while hiking along a ridge. The entrance was subtle, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. A narrow slit in limestone, partially concealed by vegetation. Locally, it was known as Weatherly Well. Few had attempted serious exploration. Standing above it now, the 4 men studied the opening carefully. It measured just 9 inches across, 9 inches of unforgiving rock. From the surface, the first 4 feet descended straight down. Beyond that, the shaft opened slightly before dropping again. First 7 feet, then another 10 feet into a wider chamber below. The geometry was intimidating. Only one person could enter at a time. No one could assist once the descent began. And whoever went first would be alone in the dark. Alan England, 63 years old, lean and composed, stepped forward. Despite his age, he remained physically capable and methodical. More importantly, he was the smallest of the group, giving him the best chance of navigating the tight slot. He volunteered without hesitation. Ropes were anchored securely above the entrance. Knots were double-checked. Anchors were tested. In caves, redundancy saves lives. Preparation finished. England approached the slit and removed his outer layer, knowing friction would be a problem. He adjusted his helmet and light, clipped into the safety rope, and placed his hands on either side of the stone. From above, it appeared manageable. From below, it would feel entirely different. England inhaled deeply and began lowering himself into the slot. Immediately, the rock pressed inward. 9 inches is not a comfortable space for a human torso. It demands compression. It demands precision. He turned one shoulder inward, angling his body diagonally. Limestone scraped against his back and chest. His ribs compressed as he exhaled deliberately to reduce expansion. Every movement required planning. There was no room to adjust once fully committed. If he misaligned his hips or shoulders, he would wedge himself in place. Dampness coated the walls. Moisture soaked through his clothing quickly, increasing friction between fabric and stone. The rock was cold and slick, yet somehow abrasive at the same time. Still, gravity was working with him. Slowly, carefully, he slid downward. Inch by inch, his boots found purchase briefly against tiny irregularities in the limestone. His gloved hands guided his descent, using the rope primarily as balance rather than weight-bearing support. After what felt longer than it was, the slot widened slightly. England dropped the final few feet into a small pocket below. He exhaled fully. The next section, a 7-foot drop, was easier. He controlled the descent with the rope and lowered himself into a modest chamber. For the first time, he could stand. His limbs tingled from compression. His shoulders ached where stone had pressed relentlessly. He raised his headlamp and surveyed the darkness. The beam illuminated rough limestone walls and another drop ahead, 10 feet deeper into twisting passageways that vanished into shadow. He paused. The cave beyond looked complex. Narrow angles, blind corners, unpredictable shapes. Attempting it alone would require advanced rope work and backup support. England understood something fundamental about caves. Getting in is only half the journey. Getting out is everything. He made the conservative decision he would return to the surface. Climbing the 7-foot section was manageable. Experience guided him, controlled breathing, careful foot placement, steady upward progress. Soon, he stood once again at the base of the 9-inch slot. He looked up. From below, it seemed narrower, more vertical, more hostile. Descending had required surrender to gravity. Ascending demanded opposition. He positioned himself beneath the slot, reached upward, and began climbing. The rope supported part of his weight, but the walls did not shift. They did not widen. He angled one shoulder into the opening and began pressing upward. Almost immediately, resistance increased. His shoulders jammed, his chest compressed tightly between stone edges. He exhaled and tried to gain another inch. Nothing. He shifted his hips slightly, attempting a different angle. The limestone bit into his ribs. He pulled on the rope. The slot gripped him harder. He was wedged. At first it seemed temporary, just a matter of alignment. But as he attempted to reposition, the stone pressed tighter. His wet clothing, saturated from condensation, created drag against the rock. Friction multiplied. From above, Lewis and Moore could see him partially lodged inside the slot. They applied gentle tension to the rope, hoping upward force might free him. Instead, each tug forced his torso tighter into the narrowest section. "Stop!" England called upward, his voice echoing faintly. They released the rope immediately. He tried again, twisting, pushing, exhaling to reduce chest expansion. The slot did not care. Minutes passed, then more. He was not gaining ground. There is a moment in every entrapment when confidence gives way to realization. England felt it. His muscles strained against immovable rock. His shoulders began to tremble from sustained pressure. The stone pressed inward against his lungs, limiting expansion. Breathing became shallow, not from lack of oxygen, but from lack of space. Above him, winter air flowed down into the shaft like invisible water. The moisture in his clothing leached warmth rapidly. His body began to shiver. Shivering in open space is uncomfortable. Shivering in a confined shaft is agony. The involuntary contractions forced his ribs against stone repeatedly. Pain radiated through his chest and shoulders. He could not generate enough movement to free himself. Time stretched. 1 hour, 2, 3. His hands trembled. His grip weakened. Hypothermia crept slowly inward. Lewis and Olson lowered additional clothing and a thermos filled with warm liquid. He drank carefully, grateful for the heat. But warmth cannot circulate effectively in a body compressed and immobilized. The slot was not collapsing. It was simply holding him. 5 hours passed. 5 hours suspended vertically between earth and winter sky. His voice, once steady, grew weaker. He understood something critical. He would not escape on his own. "Get help," he called upward. It was not panic. It was acceptance. Lewis and Olson hiked swiftly back through the woods to call the East Tennessee Cave Rescue Team. Within 2 hours, trained responders arrived with specialized equipment designed for vertical extractions. By the time they reached England, he had been trapped nearly 5 hours. His skin was pale. His body shook uncontrollably. Hypothermia had progressed steadily. Rescuers worked methodically. First, stabilize the patient. Layers were added, warm fluids encouraged, reassurance constant. Second, solve the geometry. They installed a pulley system above the slot, creating mechanical advantage. Every angle of force was calculated carefully. Too much tension could cause injury, dislocated shoulders, rib fractures. Too little would accomplish nothing. Slowly, controlled upward pressure was applied. England felt the stone scrape along his ribs and collarbone. The rock resisted, his body protested. Minutes passed. Then, subtle movement. A shift no wider than a finger. Rescuers adjusted the angle slightly, another inch. England gritted his teeth as limestone tore at soaked fabric and skin. The shaft had held him for hours. It would not surrender easily. After nearly an hour of coordinated effort, his shoulders cleared the narrowest section. Once that barrier was overcome, the rest followed. He emerged from the slot exhausted, scraped, hypothermic, but alive. Cold forest air struck his face like relief. Despite his condition, he insisted on walking to the vehicle under his own strength. Later, reflecting on the event, he acknowledged the simplest lesson. He had underestimated the exit. Going down had been manageable. Coming back up nearly ended his life. Weatherly Well remains unchanged. The 9-inch slot still waits in Tennessee limestone. It has no memory of that winter morning, no awareness of the 5 hours it held a man between life and loss. Caves do not intend harm, but they do not forgive miscalculation. In the narrow dark, physics always wins. And survival depends not only on courage, but on knowing when to turn back.